Boss is going to keep asking me to work shifts when I take time off? How about I take a permanent vacation? Disclaimer: I tried to keep it as short as I could, but it still turned out pretty lengthy. No TLDR. Read it or don't. This is the story of my former employer. I work in the Northeast US and my employer at the time was a very small company, boss and 5 employees, in a very specific industry where 90% of our work was on construction sites, and finding a well-qualified person in this very specific industry is a very hard thing to do. My boss was the kind of boss that every employee hates. Corners were cut every possible way in order to keep overhead costs down. On top of that, he would constantly overbook on jobs, like signing contracts for 6 projects during the same week, knowing full well that he only has 5 employees, which would result in the employees often working 14-hour days or more, which really sucks when you're on salary, no overtime. His worst attribute by far was approving time off and then during your time off calling or texting you asking if you would be willing to work a day or cut your vacation short. Sometimes he'd even ask you to move your time off to the next week or next month when the workload lightens up. Hint: it never lightened up due to his constant overbooking. After working at this company for 6 years, I got used to all the aforementioned annoyances. But then things changed. My son was born. In the months leading up to his birth, I made it very clear that I would be taking a 5-week unpaid leave of absence once he arrives. The state we're in allows new parents to take up to 8 weeks of unpaid leave. I told my boss that I know 8 weeks would be a huge strain on such a small company, so I was willing to take 5 weeks, but those 5 weeks would be completely off the grid, meaning don't call me, don't text me. If you're going to ask me to do anything work-related, the answer will be no, so don't bother. I'm going to be spending time with my family. He 100% agreed. Fast forward to my son's birth. He was born on a Friday, and after a short stay in the NICU, "Don't worry, he's fine," was released on Monday, and we took him home. Tuesday morning, the next day, I wake up to a missed call, an email, and 3 texts, all from my boss asking me to call him back ASAP. For reasons still unknown to me to this day, I call him back and he tells me there's a slight emergency, code speak for he screwed up the scheduling and has a job with no employee at it, and asks if I could maybe come into work that day and maybe work a couple more days that week until he finds someone to cover it. I lost it. I literally felt something in my neck snap and unleashed a verbal assault on him that I still feel bad about now, a year later. I ended my rant with an apology. As much of a dick move it was for him to be calling me in that situation, it was still completely unprofessional of me to say what I said to him. Obviously, he wasn't a big fan of what I said, and after a small rant of his own ended with the sentences that made this whole story possible. He said, "You've got a pretty good gig at this company that most people your age would be thankful for. I'd be impressed if you could find a better job in this field, because I've been doing this for 30 years and I know how small this industry is, and trust me, good jobs like yours don't come along very often. Think about that." So we ended the call and I did what he said. I thought about it. After thinking about it for about 30 seconds, I got out of bed, sat down in front of my computer and started looking at job postings. 5 weeks later, my time off came to an end, and my first day back I came into work, walked into my boss's office and handed him a piece of paper. "Boss, what's this?" "Me, I thought about what you said about how you'd be really impressed if I could find a better job than the one I have here. So I did." My boss reads over what I handed him. A job offer from a competitor for the exact same job I was performing, but at a 25% higher salary, an extra week of paid vacation compared to what I had, and a stipulation that company policy was that work hours are capped at 8 per day, meaning that once I hit 8 hours on a job I pack up and leave it until tomorrow. No exceptions. "Boss, well then can I have the day to crunch some numbers to come up with a counter offer?" "Me, no. Don't bother. I just wanted you to see it because I know you wouldn't have believed me otherwise." Gave my 2 weeks notice and left for whatever job site I was on that day. That was a year ago and I could not be happier with my new job. I get to spend lots of time with my boy, and that's the best job perk there is. For all you bosses and managers out there, Don't duck with your employees, especially the good ones. Treat them how you'd want to be treated. Most employees don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses.
Now to the comments. My company has a line in my contract that if anyone calls me and asks me to work on a scheduled day off, I am to be paid for 8 hours that day and I keep my day off. I assume to curb shit like this.
What size/kind of company allows you to negotiate things like this? I'm about to graduate college and my experience, with a 7,000 plus employee chemical plant, as an engineer is that almost nothing is negotiable.
I just looked on Google. My company currently has about 270,000 employees, of course, not all of them under the same contract. And I've been here almost 20 years. I'm pretty sure that rule was negotiated by the union. Most employees don't quit their jobs. They quit their bosses. So true. Congrats on your son and the better job.
Left my old job because my boss saw my value yet did nothing to keep me there. Moved to a new city working an easier job where my new boss actively fights for me to be a permanent fixture/paid fairly.
You still gave 2 weeks notice, you're a classy man.
For real, I'd have been like consider this my 2 weeks. Also, I'm extending my FMLA for 2 more weeks.
Gross username LOL. Congratulations on the new job. I was in a similar situation a few years ago after my daughter was born, but my boss went the opposite way to your old one. Mine was full of apologies. I got an extra couple of days of paid holidays and took my wife out for a nice dinner in a restaurant on the company's expense account. There were a couple of things over the years that I've been annoyed with, but overall, the place I'm with now are pretty decent.
Congrats to you as well. Seems like it is going just fine.
To be honest, thank your beautiful kid who made the change for you. I ducking love this. As a small business owner, I can't understand why a boss would treat their employee like shit and expect them to stick around. Your boss sounds like a nightmare and I'm so happy you left for greener pastures.
Small businesses are hit or miss. I've worked for a couple. One was horrible, my current one is amazing. I'm glad you treat your employees right.
I worked at a small shack new barbecue place a few years ago. Owner was a dick and verbally abusive to his wife and daughter at work, drank a lot, smoked pot in front of guests. One day he came into the shack pissed off and started throwing things, and the corner of a hotel pan clipped me in the back of the head. I packed my knives and left without a word. Poor guy didn't have anyone staffed, and he sure as hell didn't pay me enough to cook, clean, and wash dishes to put up with any more of that crap. He's now only open on Saturdays. Yeah, people in charge sometimes forget that skilled employees, especially in a niche field, are often very hard to find or replace, and if they are short-handed, odds are that several other prospective employers are as well and will be all too happy to hire away someone from them.
I love the boss's turnaround, too. You should count yourself lucky that you have a job here. Nobody else will do better. Let me see if we can come up with a counter offer. We don't want to lose you. Whiplash much.
I noticed that sounds like an abusive partner. I'm counting down my days right now. I have a pretty sweet gig, but I'm massively underpaid relative to my colleagues in the same role, purely because I was hired on as a tech and worked my way up to a project manager. Couple that with no raises since last March of 2018, and no raise in sight until end of year from what we've heard, pending profitability. My current employer fired my former boss over a year ago. He reached out to me after his non-compete expired and offered me a position with his new employer starting in September for $20,000 more than I'm making now. I'm burning all my PTO, and even dates I had marked off later in the year. I'm moving to use them now rather than later. I lucked out and work asked me to travel for a job in 2 weeks, right when some of my PTO was planned and approved already. I agreed, re-entered all my PTO, so I'm burning it all before September now under the guise of I'm not booked on projects and the ones I'm on should be slow and they're cool with it. The amount of shocked Pikachu memes that will be given when I tender my resignation to my director, sales lead and sales VP is going to be priceless. All, if you have an employee billing client at $170 an hour, 25 to 40 hours a week consistently, pay them more than $65,000 a year.
OP replied. Jesus. Even shitty boss in this story paid me $60,000 a year and only billed me out for $75 an hour.
Finally, a story I can completely relate to. My baby girl was born last year and boss tried to make me work during my paternity leave, paid by government. When I pointed it out, he apologized in such bad way I just started looking elsewhere. It has been a month I switched and I've never felt happier, healthier, and closer to my beautiful baby girl. I was the third in 2 weeks who quit, and because I kept in touch with former co-workers, I've learned another one will be handing his 2 weeks notice after the vacation and another one might join me in a different department. So in other words, in a business with 4 employees, they will now be 3 and soon 2 tech to deals with a workload of 15 techs. No more my circus, no my monkeys. Previous company HR may final realized that I wasn't exaggerating when I said he's unfit to be a supervisor with his passive-aggressive attitude and moodiness.
God, I left my old job because of the managers. And it was a rolling rock of quitting as well. Push push push, even when we made our numbers that wasn't good enough. Everyone else didn't. Doesn't matter, you can. They fired one guy, next day I quit, then 4 more followed me. It was a small department of 15 people, 6 gone in a week. It was basically 24/7 forced OT because of it.
Managers always push, but when push comes to shove, they can't even do the job themselves. I hate incompetent managers who think they are the best because their email signature says manager.